Nearly $600 billion in trade frozen by crippling tariffs, 145% from the US, 125% from China. Global supply chains are crumbling. Prices are skyrocketing, and the specter of a worldwide recession looms large. Then, out of nowhere, on May 11, 2025, in a luxurious villa by Lake Geneva, both sides announced, "We've made significant progress." But, progress on what? A real deal to save the global economy, or just empty promises to calm jittery markets? The answer isn't simple. Stick around, because this isn't just about trade, it's about power, psychology, and the future of globalization. You'll want to know what's really happening behind those closed doors in Geneva. The backstory: a trade war escalates and global pressure mounts. To grasp the weight of the Geneva talks, let's rewind to the root of this trade war. Since President Donald Trump took office in January 2025, he's doubled down on protectionism, slapping a 145% tariff on Chinese goods, accusing Beijing of unfair trade practices and failing to curb fentanyl-related chemical exports. China hit back with 125% tariffs, vowing not to bow to imperialism or bullying. The result? Nearly $600 billion in bilateral trade is stuck in limbo, global supply chains are in chaos. And China's economic growth forecasts are tanking, with Nomura warning of 16 million jobs at risk. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, Director General of the World Trade Organization, WTO, has sounded the alarm, warning that these tariffs are disrupting supply chains and threatening a global recession. She hailed the Geneva talks as a positive and constructive step toward de-escalation, urging ongoing dialogue to resolve disputes. Her plea underscores the fear that without a resolution, economies reliant on US-China trade will take a brutal hit. The pressure isn't just internal. Global financial markets are reeling, with the S&P 500 and Nasdaq swinging wildly. Countries like Vietnam and Japan, heavily tied to US-China trade, are scrambling to strike side deals with Washington, raising fears in Beijing of being sidelined. China's central bank has rolled out stimulus measures, while the US faces risks of goods shortages and soaring inflation. Why Geneva? Switzerland, with its neutral stance and reputation as a conflict resolution hub, was the perfect stage. Swiss diplomats, leveraging recent visits to Washington and Beijing, brokered the meeting. But make no mistake, this isn't just a friendly sit-down. Both sides are playing a high-stakes game of power, with every move calculated. The talks: what we know and what's still hidden. The Geneva talks unfolded over 2 days, May 10 and 11, 2025, with heavyweights at the table. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, Trade Representative Jamieson Greer, and Chinese Vice Premier He Lifeng. After 8 hours of talks on day one, both sides stayed tight-lipped, leaving the world guessing. But on day two, they dropped a bombshell: significant progress had been made, with details promised for Monday.
And I think that led to a great deal of the productivity we've seen. We will be giving details tomorrow. But I can tell you that the talks were productive. We had the Vice Premier, 2 Vice Ministers who were integrally involved, Ambassador Jamieson and myself. And I spoke to President Trump, as did Ambassador Jamieson last night, and he is fully informed of what is going on. So there will be a complete briefing tomorrow morning.
President Donald Trump took to Truth Social to praise the talks, calling them a total reset, conducted in a friendly but constructive way. He claimed many issues were discussed, many things agreed upon, emphasizing his push for China to open its markets to American businesses. Trump even floated the idea of lowering tariffs to 80% from 145%, saying it seems reasonable, but left the final call to Bessent. Yet, he offered no specifics. fueling curiosity about what was actually achieved.
To understand how quickly we were able to come to agreement, which reflects that perhaps the differences were not so large as maybe thought. That being said, there was a lot of groundwork that went into these 2 days. Just to remember why we're here in the first place. The United States has a massive $1.2 trillion trade deficit. So the president declared a national emergency and imposed tariffs. And we're confident that the deal we struck with our Chinese partners will help us to work toward resolving that national emergency.
Jamieson Greer, the U.S. trade representative, called the talks highly constructive and hinted at a deal addressing national security concerns tied to China's trade practices. He praised the Chinese negotiators as tough, but suggested the quick consensus shows the gap between the two sides might not be as wide as thought. Meanwhile, Vice Premier He Lifeng described the discussions as frank, in-depth, and constructive, saying both sides reached an important consensus and agreed to set up a trade consultation mechanism for further talks. But he also warned that China will not be afraid and will fight to the end if the U.S. keeps up the trade war. What do we know? The U.S. claims a deal to shrink the $295 billion trade deficit with China. China talks of an important consensus and a new consultation mechanism. But here's the kicker. Neither side mentioned cutting tariffs, the heart of the conflict. Trump's 80% tariff suggestion is intriguing, but there's no sign of an agreement on it. So, is this progress a real fix, or just a vague framework to delay the fight? Sun Yun, director of the China program at the Stimson Center, is skeptical about immediate results. Noting this was the first face-to-face between Besant and He Lifeng, she doubts the meeting will deliver big changes right away. Her best-case scenario? Both sides agree to small, simultaneous tariff cuts to signal positivity to markets. But she warns, words alone won't cut it, concrete action is needed to rebuild trust. Meanwhile, Howard Lutnick says Scott Bessent is in China to de-escalate trade tensions and reset the conversation. Another curious detail, China waived tariffs on some U.S. goods before the talks. And the U.S. reciprocated on items like strollers. Is this a sign of goodwill or a tactical move to set a positive tone? Power, psychology, and strategy. The Trump administration seems to be wielding a stick-and-carrot approach. The 145% tariffs are the stick, hammering China's economy, while the promise of a deal is the carrot, luring Beijing to the table. Trump's Truth Social post, touting a total reset and pushing for Chinese market access, signals his intent to claim a win for American businesses. His suggestion of an 80% tariff shows flexibility, but delegating the final decision to Besant is a clever move. It lets him take credit for progress while dodging blame if things go south. Greer, as a key negotiator, stressed that the deal tackles national security concerns, likely tied to issues like fentanyl. But Trump faces domestic heat, rising inflation, potential goods shortages, and pushback from U.S. companies like Apple, which rely on China's market. Dmitry Grozubinski, executive director of the Geneva Trade Platform, calls the talks the first step in a dance to size each other up. He says the U.S. is trying to figure out what China's win looks like and whether it's worth the cost. A quick deal is unlikely, he argues, but the meeting shows the U.S. knows escalation hurts them too. China came to Geneva in a weaker position but not without leverage. Economic stimulus and tariff exemptions on some U.S. goods signal Beijing's willingness to bend to limit damage. He Lifeng's talk of mutual benefits and making the cooperation pie bigger paints a cooperative front, but his warning that China will fight to the end draws a clear line. It's a balancing act, conceding tactically while projecting strength. Sun Yun notes that China's agreement to talk without demanding U.S. tariff cuts up front was a surprise, hinting at how badly their economy is hurting. But she cautions that any deal needs real action, as vague promises won't restore confidence. both sides are playing a psychological game. Trump's "total reset" and "tremendous progress" posts on Truth Social aim to convince Americans he's in control and delivering wins, especially on market access. Li Feng's talk of "consensus" and a "first step" positions China as an equal partner, not a pushover. Grozobinski points out that both nations are bleeding from tariffs and would lose more if tensions drag on. The silence on specifics, like tariffs, is a deliberate psychological tactic, keeping markets and the public on edge while giving both sides time to craft their narratives before Monday's announcement. It also pressures investors to make bets with incomplete information. Global impact and significance. The Geneva talks sparked a flicker of hope in financial markets. The Standard & Poor's 500 E-minis jumped 1.3%. And Nasdaq futures climbed 1.6% after the Progress news, Reuters. But investors are wary, as no concrete deal has surfaced. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, Director General of the World Trade Organization, WTO, stresses that sustained dialogue is critical to avoid a global economic disaster, especially with supply chains in disarray, Reuters. If Monday's details fall short, markets could nosedive. Nations like Vietnam, India, and Japan are eyeing deals with the US, while Europe and developing countries fret over supply chain disruptions. Dmitry Grozobinski warns that prolonged tensions could devastate global economies. Given the US and China's central roles in world trade, recent developments in the year 2025 have worsened the situation. The US's sweeping new tariffs have led to significant trade contraction and welfare losses, hitting the US particularly hard. Global supply chains are facing severe disruptions, with direct trade between the US and China at risk of collapse, though China's indirect exports to the US via other countries are less affected, CEPR. Companies are responding by shifting supply chains to countries like Vietnam, India, and the United Arab Emirates to dodge tariffs, reshaping global trade patterns. This shift is causing volatile shipping costs and port congestion, making business planning a nightmare. Take the auto industry, for example, reliant on Chinese components. It's grappling with higher production costs and delivery delays. Major US retailers like Walmart have warned of empty shelves if tariffs stay sky-high. Meanwhile, countries like Vietnam and India are seeing export booms in electronics and textiles as multinationals seek alternatives to China. But this restructuring is creating a less efficient, less transparent trade system, jacking up costs for consumers worldwide. The Geneva meeting was the first high-level US-China dialogue since Trump's inauguration. Sun Yun sees it as a sign that both sides know the status quo is unsustainable, even if quick results are unlikely. But the lack of transparency, even in Trump's upbeat claims, shows trust remains low. Can Li Feng's proposed trade consultation mechanism build confidence, or is it just a stall tactic? Beyond economics, this trade war is tangled up with national security concerns and geopolitical tensions, complicating efforts to find a solution. Both sides need to find a way to coexist economically while addressing their own priorities. Completely decoupling the two economies is unrealistic. Given their deep interdependence, China may hold an edge in this fight, as its economy has grown more resilient after years of slowdown, and the US can't easily replace its reliance on Chinese goods, especially in areas like green technology and critical minerals. The near future, what's next? Looking ahead, three scenarios could unfold after Monday's announcement on May 12, 2025. A framework deal with gradual tariff cuts. If the US and China agree to lower tariffs, say, to Trump's suggested 80%, it could ease tensions and revive some trade. Sun Yun says even a small cut would send a positive signal to markets, but she insists on tangible steps to maintain trust. A vague deal, prolonging talks. If Monday's details are just broad promises, like Li Feng's consultation mechanism, without clear tariff cuts, the trade war could drag on. Grozobinski calls this a dance to keep probing. But lack of substance could fuel market instability. Talks collapse, tensions escalate. Though less likely, if core issues like tariffs or economic reforms remain unresolved. The trade war could intensify. Okonjo-Iweala warns this would push the world toward recession, as global supply chains can't take more strain. Whatever happens, Geneva has laid the groundwork for a new phase in US-China relations. Trump's talk of a total reset frames the talks as a personal triumph. But the real question is whether both sides can overcome distrust to find a win-win, or if they'll keep dragging the world into uncertainty. The Geneva talks aren't just about trade, they're a battle for power, where everyone wants to come out on top. Trump calls it a total reset, but what will Monday reveal? A game-changing deal? Or a diplomatic dodge to buy time? And most importantly, what will you, as an observer, investor, or global citizen, do when the curtain lifts? Keep your eyes on Monday's announcement. Ask questions. Get ready, because what happens in Geneva could shape your wallet, my future, and the world's economy. Will you sit on the sidelines, or jump into the game?